In a system under pressure to improve outcomes for SEND and disadvantaged pupils, understanding how rhythm shapes attention may help schools strengthen universal provision before the difficulties escalate. There's a debate in education at the moment about learning and SEND. Every case is unique and everyone wants the best outcome for each child. Within this context, teachers and parents need to know how best to approach the apparent barriers to learning that these children face. When I was in this role in a school, teachers would often ask me this: do I differentiate or do I place them in detention? Teachers do not give preferential treatment, and yet a child with SEND must be supported so that they are able to access the curriculum. When perception of phonemes is weak, we might notice a child presenting as withdrawn through overstimulation, or highly distractible through a state of vigilance, or anxious and constantly seeking reassurance through contact with others. These behaviours tell us something about the experience of the child. So firstly, when a child is watching their teacher's face, they cannot look at the board to assimilate the content. The teacher may be aware that this child is highly motivated, but might not realise that what they have seen is actually a coping strategy compensating for weak phonemic awareness. A pupil who is looking around the room and alert to every sound outside, but unable to focus their attention, is likely to anticipate changes in the external environment as their priority. For them, directing attention away from the room onto the smallest sounds of language, the phonemes, is like trying to hold a balloon underwater. Their attention will revert straight back to reading the room as soon as possible. The child seeking contact with others is often attuned to facial expressions, tone of voice, and other contextual cues such as gestures. These cues are meaningful signals that bolster communication and compensate for weak phonemic awareness. And this student uses these cues to anticipate what others want or need from them. They place others' needs ahead of their own as a way to manage their situation. This strategy often ensures that they belong, even if their perception of sensory information is incomplete. And this child will be among the first to be helpful or to contribute to a team effort. A well-adjusted pupil is able to learn because the sensory input from the classroom environment is not overwhelming, it's not confusing, and it's not threatening for them. The inhibitory interneurons of the nervous system have adapted to strike the perfect balance. They can dampen down the noise, and they can sharpen perception of the more salient sensory information, making the learning experience both rewarding and effective. Given the current challenges in education, is it possible that we can address these learning differences and steer children away from withdrawn or vigilant or fawning, people-pleasing behaviours towards well-adjusted, more equitable states that are better suited to learning in the mainstream classroom? Rather than chasing easy wins, gamifying learning through quizzes, or dangling juicy incentives, we could instead fine-tune the inhibitory system using rhythm. When we learn a new skill, we begin with small steps and we repeat them, introducing rhythm until they cohere into coordinated movement. This is what we do every day. Further repetition and variation leads to mastery of said skill as we build many versions of our new skill, leading to flexibility and adaptation. And what I mean here is not a rhythm-based skill. What I'm talking about is any skill, such as driving a car, riding a bicycle, learning to type. Any skill is built up in that same way. Repetition without variation leads to monotony and fragmentation of focus. Too little variation sets us up to fail to adapt. That heavy bored feeling protects us from becoming sitting ducks. On the other hand, if we add variety, we restore the playfulness and the enjoyment to the learning process, and we're able to adapt to what comes along. If we're learning to strike goals in sport, we might practice delivering the ball to the same area of the net, but to do so from many different angles. We discover that the same principle holds if we move from spatial skills of scoring goals to the auditory skills of conversation. By refining the timing of our enunciation, we can direct children's attention to the smallest sounds of language, the phonemes. The distinctive quality of each phoneme is positioned right at the beginning of the sound. The front edge of the phoneme is salient, and the rest is noise. If a child misses the detail at the front edge of the sound, then the salience of each sound does not really register and might not be available to the child at all. Researchers established 50 years ago that the processes accounting for sensitivity to phonemic awareness and rhythmic awareness overlapped. Some years later, findings showed that this overlap was so close that it was difficult to distinguish between the sensitivity to the phonemes and the sensitivity to rhythm. One explanation may be that the same inhibitory system governs the detection of salience in rhythmic and phonemic auditory processing. Although language acquisition takes place during a sensitive window of development in the first 5 years of a child's life, there is no such limitation on the refinement of rhythmic awareness. So by developing sensitivity to rhythm, we can still build inhibitory control, and to do so within the curriculum by cultivating rhythmic precision. In this way, executive functions are deliberately nurtured at school rather than assuming that all children enter Key Stage 1 with effective levels of inhibitory control built in. We must be careful not to underestimate what the children can achieve, but also we must acknowledge that a child or a group of children with little inhibitory control or phonemic awareness can also disrupt the learning of many other children. It's really necessary to strike the right balance and to practice disciplined noticing and reflection. The class teacher might notice that a pupil struggles with coordinating their handwriting. Weak inhibitory control can impede the development of fine motor skills. Rhythm offers precision in timing, which assists the coordination of fine motor control in handwriting. A teacher might also notice that a child cannot follow instructions or retain information. A salience versus noise imbalance may be playing out. The detection of salience over noise is governed by inhibitory control and impacts working memory. That's the capacity to hold and manipulate information in mind. Rhythm increases the detection of salience at the front edge of the sounds of language, and improved sensitivity to phonemic awareness lightens the cognitive load as an added benefit. When noise in the sounds no longer absorbs attention, there is increased capacity in working memory and a feeling of ease when following instructions and when reading. The teacher might also notice that a student lags behind when the class sings or reads aloud or performs physical actions as a group. No matter how many times the class rehearses, the lag never really disappears. And yet, in a rhythm-based intervention, that same pupil spontaneously corrects their timing and synchronizes with the others. The principle is the same. With too much noise, the child remains in a state of overstimulation and cognitive overloading. But in a context designed to optimize rhythm-based processing, the same child self-corrects. Taken together, these illustrations show why popular ideas around rhythm in the classroom, such as shaking a jar of rice, chanting nursery rhymes, or placing an emphasis on poetry, do benefit pupils in different ways, but they are not specific enough to support children with weak inhibitory control and weak working memory. These are two of the core executive functions. By the same token, integrating rhythm or movement into phonics lessons is a great idea because an embodied multisensory approach can strengthen encoding, especially in young children. However, children experiencing weakness in inhibitory control, working memory, and phonemic awareness are likely to perceive noise over salience to a greater extent, even in this context. I've seen the benefit of prioritising a rhythm-based approach in mainstream and special schools in Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. And the findings of research on this approach have been through peer review, and the statistically significant effects in reading are robust. So I will never forget the day that I analysed my first pilot study data back in 2001. The pilot took place in a school in Hertfordshire. I had worked there for 10 years as a visiting music teacher. As well as assessing Year 7 pupils' perception of rhythm and reading, I had also tested their fine and gross motor skills. The fine motor task was to cut around an elephant shape within a double outline, and the gross motor control task tested whether the students could balance along a thin line of tape on the floor. So I brought these data to a quantitative analysis class on regression. I entered the data means for the group, and I had expected that rate of reading and gross motor control would improve, because I thought that rhythm would make reading more efficient and also refine an overall sense of orientation in time and space. I was surprised when the software package produced the results. Reading comprehension and cutting out an elephant were highly statistically significant. Our lecturer for the evening peered over my shoulder and said, "That's a very rare outcome, but why?" I admitted that this was unexpected to me as well, and in every subsequent assessment, whether I was doing this for a school or for research, the effects on reading comprehension have been absolutely consistent and are always accompanied by gains in reading fluency as well. And for early stage readers, I can now report that there are consistent and significant gains in phonemic blending. And now, 25 years later, it's becoming much easier to interpret the positive effect of rhythm on children who are not meeting age expectation. We now know so much more about executive functions and the importance of inhibitory control for learning. And I now understand that the significant gains in cutting out an elephant and reading comprehension can be explained by improved inhibitory control. Rhythm-based learning and reading demand precision. An increase in precision requires a gain in inhibitory control and strengthens executive function. Rhythm-based intervention is effective among children who are not reading fluently, or who have gaps in phonemic awareness, or who have poor impulse control, or who cannot follow instructions in their lessons. These children may be withdrawn or easily distracted or anxious or neurodivergent. If you'd like to explore how rhythm-based strategies can strengthen inclusive phonics teaching and reading later on in the curriculum, please download my free resources and join my upcoming webinar. I really look forward to seeing you there. Please visit my website to do so. Bye for now.